Tonight on Bridge City News, Old Man Winter paid us another visit and it made for some treacherous driving in our region once again. An online petition has been launched to remove a pro-life bench in Taber. We have the details. And a spokesperson with the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms speaks out about the province's plan of potentially defunding Christian schools. Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. If you live in and around Lethbridge, you woke up to a winter wonderland once again. We received up to 4 centimeters of the white stuff earlier today. The drive to and from work was quite slippery, and the speed limit on Whoop Up Drive was lowered to 60 kilometers an hour. A few cars ended up in the ditch, and snowplows were out for a good part of the day. The Colehurst Fire Department responded to a truck rollover, which sent one person to hospital earlier today. 511 Alberta reported that nearly all highways around the city were at least partly snow-covered. Many students were not in school today, but not because of the weather. Students had a professional development day, which meant no classes. An 8-year-old child was taken to a hospital in Calgary after being hit by a pickup truck on Saturday night. Police say just after 7 o'clock they were called to a collision along Black Wolf Boulevard North. The child suffered injuries and was taken to Calgary for further medical examination. Alcohol was not a factor in the accident. Lethbridge police have launched an investigation after a woman was attacked in her garage over the weekend. According to the authorities, the 24-year-old woman arrived to her home around 10 o'clock Saturday night along 18th Avenue South. After noticing that her garage door was open, the woman went inside when she was grabbed by the attacker, who then struck her head against the wall, then fled the scene. She suffered minor injuries as a result. The suspect was wearing dark-colored clothing, which police say included a black toque and a hoodie. If you have information about this assault, please contact Crime Stoppers right away at 1-800-222-TIPS. That's 1-800-222-8477. A date has been set for the sentencing of a former elementary school teacher who admitted to making and possessing child pornography. That date is December 17th. 44-year-old Mark Anderson's lawyer appeared in court today, stating that the forensic assessment outpatient service is still being conducted. It's a key aspect of the report, which was requested by the defense. The former Brockett school teacher admitted to police that there wasn't a time he couldn't remember being attracted to children. The drug crisis continues in our city. Trevor Lewington, CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge, stopped by our studio recently, and I asked him if the opioid issue is having a major impact on businesses, especially in the downtown core.
We've definitely heard from a number of businesses in the downtown area that are either considering relocating out of downtown or changing the way they do business. But I think the key distinction there is they're not looking at leaving Lethbridge or shutting down. But again, we need to address those concerns. We simply can't have, traffic declines of 50% in a retail business. That's not something that's sustainable. So we've got to figure out a way to help those businesses to either change their business or find a different way.
Catch my full interview with Mr. Lewington as we discuss the economic health of Lethbridge and what new businesses are coming to our city. That's coming up in the second half of our show. An online petition has been launched to have the town of Taber remove a pro-life bench from the Taber Cemetery. The petition has so far gathered hundreds of signatures. The petition says it's in very poor taste to place this message in a cemetery. The bench was actually installed in 2008, and a similar request to have it removed was made in 2015, but that was denied by Taber Town Council. The Alberta government is apparently now demanding that independent schools renounce their religious policies. If not, those schools could be defunded and have their accreditation suspended or even cancelled. John Carpe, who's the president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, says Education Minister David Eggen is attacking the welcoming, caring, and safe learning environment these schools have in place.
These are serious threats, and it's a very serious violation. We do not have the religious freedom in this country that we had even 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And it's if citizens do not take action to defend religious freedom, it's just going to go away step by step.
The Justice Centre represents parents and dozens of schools challenging the province's Bill 24, which requires withholding information from parents about their own children as young as 5 years of age. Catch what Mr. Carpe has to say along with our CEO, Leon Fontaine, about the challenges faith-based schools face. That's coming up in the second half of our show. Today marks the start of Poverty Awareness Week, and Lethbridge College kicked it off with a free lunch for students. The Ecumenical Campus Ministry provided a free bowl of chili to students and staff, which was great timing with the cooler winter weather arriving. Poverty Awareness Week at the college is about acknowledging the financial stress on students.
So we're doing free food every day this week, in different formats, and we're doing seminars on things like managing your money, accessing all your options in terms of accessing funding, how to cook on a budget, those kinds of things.
After the lunch today, students were invited to learn more about financial literacy. Their Credit Counseling Society hosted the class to help students understand how to choose a proper bank account, budgeting, and the importance of maintaining a strong credit rating. One of the issues the college deals with is students not understanding money and budgeting when they receive a student loan.
Financial literacy is very much a taboo subject around the kitchen table at home. You know, your parents don't share how much money they make, where they spend money, how they save. And students often will come in their first year they'll really struggle to balance it out. All of a sudden, for the first time, they may have to pay meals out. They may not be given an allowance, they may be given a lump sum of money, where if you're not careful, it all disappears very quick before the end of the semester.
Poverty awareness activities continue all week at the college. Lethbridge residents will notice something different by the Japanese garden. Today, the city went to work on installing a piece of art from Lethbridge's twin city, Saint Laurent, Quebec. It's entitled simply "To Lethbridge from Ville Saint Laurent" and celebrates 50 years as twin cities. The Henderson area art piece features 4 bronze geese tethered to a sandstone being dragged along the grass. Lethbridge also sent art called "Coyote to Coyote," featuring 2 coyotes against a coulee. Hopefully you had a chance to gather up some of the leaves before the snow began flying. The residential fall leaf collection program begins tomorrow and runs until November 16th. You can call to have your leaves picked up. Staff will provide a collection date. Proper yard waste bags must be placed in the same area where garbage is collected 24 hours ahead of the pickup date. Bags must not exceed 25 pounds each. You can request 2 collections. You can also take your leaves to any of the 3 City of Lethbridge yard waste recycling sites, which are open until November 30th. For more information about the residential fall leaf collection program, call the city at 403-320-3111. Some members of the United Conservative Party who posed for photos with people wearing Soldiers of Odin clothing said they did not know what the initials SOO stood for. The pictures were taken at a pub in Edmonton over the weekend. Soldiers of Odin is the name of a group founded in Finland 3 years ago, which has conducted street patrols, it says, protects residents from a perceived threat posed by migrants. UCP leader Jason Kenney tweeted that the party condemns any group that promotes racial prejudice. A 2-vehicle crash in southwestern Saskatchewan resulted in a woman dying and a man suffering serious injuries. RCMP say the 50-year-old woman from Maple Creek was pronounced dead at the scene. The accident occurred on Highway 21 north of Maple Creek on Sunday evening. Highway 21 was blocked for several hours while police investigated. There's a huge demand for propane across the prairies as farmers are drying their crops. Officials with Federated Cooperatives Limited say semi-drivers are lined up for 4 to 6 hours at gas plants and terminals. A spokesperson with Co-op says more than twice the propane was sold last month in Melfort. Company officials say they understand farmers are frustrated, knowing it has already been a tough harvest for many of them. An explosion in a St. John, New Brunswick oil refinery sent flames and black smoke into the air yesterday. Irving Oil's Kevin Scott says the cause of the malfunction that caused the blast is not yet known.
Really tough day for us, with an incident like this, but it is something that we're very grateful for how the day turned out. Fortunately, as was mentioned, only minor injuries in the incident. And of course, we had a number of additional tradespeople there at the refinery working on our turnaround, and so very fortunate that they had only minor injuries. We had a malfunction in one of our units, a diesel treating unit that we call the HDS, and it produces finished diesel. We believe we had an explosion from the reports and then a subsequent fire from that. The unit was quickly shut down and our teams responded, both our internal teams as well as the help of the St. John Fire Department. We cleared the site, extinguished the fire. The fire did take a number of hours to extinguish with some of the material that had leaked into the area of the unit that was affected, and at times we were letting that just safely extinguish itself.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said a limousine that crashed and killed 20 people on Saturday should not have been on the road. Cuomo said the driver did not have proper licensing and the vehicle failed an inspection last month.
We have thus far are number one, the driver of the vehicle, the quote-unquote limousine, did not have the appropriate driver's license to be operating that vehicle. Second, that vehicle was inspected by the New York State Department of Transportation last month and failed inspection and was not supposed to be on the road. We don't yet know the cause of the accident, if it was a vehicle malfunction, if it was a driver malfunction, driver error. That's part of the ongoing investigation between the NTSB and the state police. The name of the company was Prestige Limousine. We're doing a cease and desist order to stop Prestige Limousine from operating until the investigation is concluded.
The firefighters who were first at the scene of the limo crash in upstate New York that left 20 people dead are still in shock. Many described it as the most horrific scene they have ever witnessed.
My guys jumped off the truck. They grabbed the jaws. I fired the jaws up. They went down there. Within 2 minutes, they had that car open. We were pulling bodies out. They were still alive. And we kept going. Trained and trained and trained, and this is not what we're trained to deal with, is the aftermath. The things we saw was like a nightmare. I don't want anybody to see this. I just wish we could get some support.
What they had to deal with here the other night is just unfathomable. It's one of the toughest things I've ever seen in my entire life.
It's an unnatural event, and it's tough to go through it and then not keep reliving it.
U.S. President Donald Trump's UN Ambassador Nikki Haley is resigning. She'll be leaving by the end of the year. They met in the Oval Office shortly after word came of her plans to resign.
She has been at the United Nations from the beginning with us, right from the beginning, and worked with us on the campaign. It's been really a long time, very intense, and she told me probably 6 months ago, she said, you know, maybe at the end of the year, at the end of a 2-year period, but at the end of the year, I want to take a little time off. I want to take a little break. She's been a very successful, as you know, governor of South Carolina for 8 years. And then she did this, and this is possibly even more intense with what's going on in the world, and very dangerous and a lot of things. But she's done a fantastic job, and we've done a fantastic job together. We've solved a lot of problems, and we're in the process of solving a lot of problems.
Officials with the Federal Emergency Management Agency in the United States say Hurricane Michael has strengthened into a Category 2 storm along the U.S. East Coast. The government agency has urged citizens to heed local warnings ahead of landfall.
Max sustained winds are now at 100 miles an hour. The storm is likely to strengthen to a Category 3 over the next 12 to 24 hours. So that is major hurricane status. It will be moving up into the Florida Big Bend area, likely during the day on Wednesday. Landfall expected around midday or into the afternoon hours. Main threats with this storm will see destructive winds, especially right along coastal areas, likely over 100 miles per hour. Storm surge will produce significant impacts, particularly in the Florida Big Bend region. Upwards of 8 to 12 foot storm surge is expected. So there could be some significant low-lying flooding in coastal areas. Then the storm will quickly move up through Georgia, expecting some damaging winds up across the state of Georgia, down trees, power lines, and power outages. And then up across the Carolinas by Thursday into Friday, we'll see additional heavy rainfall in North Carolina, where they had recently experienced flooding from Florence. But fortunately, this time the storm is not expected to stall. It will be moving rather quickly and then out to sea off the southern New England coast by Friday.
Residents and people visiting Florida lined up to buy gas and groceries as they prepare for Hurricane Michael. The storm is expected to reach the Florida Gulf Coast tomorrow.
Just making sure I have food that I don't have to cook, and making sure there's plenty of water and ice and all that kind of stuff.
We're going to go get gas right now just in case we got to get out of here.
We already had our reservations booked, so we were coming. We're hoping that it's not what's going to hit us directly.
Lots of snow today, and that trend will continue for the short term. I'll have a complete look at your weather forecast in just a moment. Snow today and more snow developing tonight with a low near -2. Tomorrow, snow tapering off with a high near +3 expected. Thursday, the sun returns, bringing us lots of sunshine and a high of 8. Friday, a chance of showers developing with the mercury climbing to 10. Saturday cooling off considerably with a mixture of sun and cloud and a high of only +1. Sunday mainly sunny and a high near 9. Checking our almanac, the average high for this time of year is 16 degrees and an average low of 2. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1943 at 27 degrees, and the record low was -10 in 1985. Sunrise was at 7:43, sunset at 6:54. Let's have a look at how tomorrow's shaping up across the country. Just a few clouds in Vancouver with a high near 15. Victoria cloudy with a high near 16. Calgary a good chance of flurries again and a high near +1. Edmonton will be mainly overcast and a high near 2. Mainly sunny and a high near 2 expected in Regina tomorrow. Sunshine and 3 degrees in Saskatoon. A good chance of flurries and a high near +1 in Winnipeg on Wednesday. Over in the central part of the country, very warm in Toronto, 26 degrees under partly cloudy sky. A chance of rain and a high of 21 expected in Ottawa tomorrow. Montreal will have showers and 14 on Wednesday. Over in the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will be rainy and 13. Halifax, Nova Scotia will also have showers, but should get up to 18. Charlottetown, PEI will have showers and 11. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, a chance of rain and a high of only 9 tomorrow. Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister's decision not to enact a carbon tax apparently caught his Tory caucus by surprise. Members were told just beforehand or found out as Pallister stood in the legislature last Wednesday. Pallister had insisted for months that a Manitoba-made tax that met the federal government halfway was better than a levy imposed by Ottawa. Last week, Pallister said he did not appreciate Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, saying he wished Pallister would encourage other Conservative premiers to get behind a carbon tax. The federal government wants to see more women enter the workforce, and why not? It would increase their GDP. Andrea Mrazek with the think tank Cardis says that's fine, but after a woman comes off a maternity leave, it's not that easy to re-enter the workforce.
My number one concern is actually that when women stay home past the 1-year maternity leave that is somewhat standard in this country, it can be very difficult for them to re-enter the workforce.
Catch my entire interview discussing the biggest concerns moms have re-entering the workforce coming up in the second half of our show. Saskatchewan's trade minister and its deputy premier are in Israel on a trade mission. Officials say the week-long trip will allow them to showcase Saskatchewan's world-class agriculture sector, business environment, and mineral industry. In 2017, Saskatchewan exported more than $19 million in goods to Israel, with lentils being the top export. They will also promote the Protein Industries Canada Supercluster. The annual pace of housing starts in Canada slowed for a third straight month. The Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation says the adjusted annual rate came in at just under 188,000 units last month. That is down from the almost 199,000 in August. Economists predicted 210,000 for September. CMHC says the recent declines in multi-unit starts contributed to the adjusted rate. Canadian consumers will get to shop for toys at an iconic American toy brand without leaving the country. Hudson's Bay will open pop-up locations of FAO Schwartz at each of its locations in Canada. The company says it is the first time the brand has had a physical presence in our country. The stores will only be set up during the Christmas shopping season. If it's a success, HBC President Alison Colville says the company will look at expanding the partnership or doing it all again next holiday season. Now here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, an online petition has been launched to have the town of Taber remove a pro-life bench from the Taber Cemetery. The petition has so far gathered hundreds of signatures. The petition says it's in poor taste to place this message in a cemetery. The bench was actually installed in 2008, and a similar request to have it removed was made in 2015, but was denied by Taber City Council. When you see news happening, drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's top stories, check out our full newscast online at bridgecitynews.ca. The provincial government is looking at potentially defunding Christian and other faith-based schools. John Carpe, president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, explains why next. We'll also hear from our CEO, Leon Fontaine, for his thoughts. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Come out for an evening of entertainment and fine dining to the 17th Annual Harvest Moon Ball on Saturday, October 13th at the Coast Hotel in Lethbridge at 5 p.m. Proceeds will support St. Michael's Health Center and St. Therese Villa. Help continue the legacy of compassionate healthcare through this worthy cause. Tickets are on sale now. For more information, email ben.kwan@covenanthealth.ca or visit covenantfoundation.ca. The United Way Coats for Kids and Families campaign continues until October 19th, accepting new and gently used winter wear for families in need in the community. Accepted items include coats, mittens, scarves, snow pants, gently used snow boots, and new hats. Items can be dropped off at United Way and any Lethbridge TD Canada Trust or ATB financial branch. Big Brothers Big Sisters in Lethbridge is searching for volunteers to mentor children and youth in their various programs. Volunteers commit anywhere from 1 hour a week to 1 full year. They have many kids on their wait list that are looking for a big brother or sister. Make a difference in a child's life and start something big. For more information, call 403-328-9355 or email info.leth@bigbrothersbigsisters.ca. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
Alberta's Minister of Education, David Eggen, is stirring things up a little for the school year. A threatening letter in the 11th hour to independent Christian schools across the province demands changes to policy, citing unwelcoming, uncaring, and disrespectful language. In the special report, attorney John Carpe explains how these words can be designed to cloak an agenda against religious freedom.
Bill 24 is now a reality in Alberta. Education in this province is changing. Our freedom of religion is eroding as never before. This legislation demands statements be removed from the anti-bullying policies in religious schools, or the school could face de-accreditation and defunding.
These are serious threats, and it's a very serious violation. We do not have the religious freedom in this country that we had even 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And it's if citizens do not take action to defend religious freedom, it's just going to go away step by step.
Here's just a taste of what Bill 24 requires independent schools to remove from their documentation. We believe men and women were created in the likeness of God and have intrinsic worth. The Bible is the unchangeable and infallible truth of the Word of God. Parents have the responsibility to raise their children and are their primary educators.
Most parents in Alberta have no idea that every school must set up a GSA the moment that one student asks for one. Most parents don't know that a GSA is advocating for a certain anti-Christian and anti-Muslim, anti-Jewish perspective on sexuality. Most parents don't know that it's illegal for teachers and principals to inform parents what's going on with their own kids. When people find out about this, they're not very happy. And certainly the mainstream media are not providing coverage for this.
On the official documentation of Alberta's Bill 24, the subtitle reads, "An Act to Support Gay-Straight Alliances." It's extremely ironic that an act which is supposed to support a group of students blatantly bullies a different group of students. Plain and simple, this is political jargon to target the religious beliefs of certain independent schools, individuals, as well as their parents, who just happen to be tax-paying citizens. I am absolutely for all students feeling included, but I firmly believe that the student culture of acceptance for others' differences will not change by the simple enacting of a bill, especially one that most Albertans are likely opposed to. So not only is this bill ineffective, it's an outright egregious attack on the freedom of religion. Saying Christianity is all about disrespecting and excluding those that subscribe to different beliefs is a statement only a person who hasn't read and understood Jesus' teachings could make. Those are just buzzwords the government is hiding behind. What Bill 24 implies is absolutely ridiculous, but it's a reality. We must act now. Don't just sit on the sidelines and think, oh, well, this is just another way us Christians are being persecuted. I'm so sick and tired of cowardly Christians. Take action. Let your voice be heard. Tell your government that you want common sense demanded in schools, not some lopsided bill that will undoubtedly hurt students and parents. Write, email, or call David Egan and Curtis Clark now. Express your opinion on Bill 24. As a citizen, you have this right. Use it. When we do nothing, we give bad ideas the chance to influence every area of our world, including politics, society, and culture. Be on the front lines of revealing to Albertans exactly what Bill 24 is. Visit thefront.ca right now. I'm not going to stay silent, and neither should you.
The new Liberal budget focused heavily on the idea of gender equity, getting more women into the labor force. The feds also want more representation of women in science, business, and government, and of course receive equal pay for equal work. Some applauded this, others not so much. Joining me now from Ottawa via Skype is Andrea Mrazek, a family program director at the national think tank Cardis. Andrea, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Andrea, there was a little bit of pushback to the gender equity budget presentation. Did you also find it somewhat patronizing toward women?
Well, when I read the budget in particular, I definitely felt that it was patronizing. I felt that it was targeting women in a way that we wouldn't target men. So if I reverse some of the things that they said, for example, we need more men as kindergarten teachers. We need more men as nurses. We wouldn't really work that hard to change the desires and choices of men, or we don't to date, even though those would be important things to achieve. So in effect, the focus on women made it a little bit coercive and as a result, patronizing.
Now, how much of a need is there to get more females into the workforce? Is Canada really lagging that far behind in that area?
I think Canada's doing fairly well, actually, with regards to women's labor force participation. So when we look at the statistics, I think we're somewhere up in the 80-some-odd% already. When we looked, for example, at other countries, you have countries that have more labor force participation, but it really is only the result of an extreme level of funding, for example, for childcare, daycare programs, this kind of thing. So it's a question of whether the output, the billions of dollars spent on something like a daycare program, is worth the nudging up of the labor force participation of women.
So why do you think there's such a big push by the feds to get more women in the workplace?
Mainly, I think that they're interested in increasing the GDP, and it is something that they hope to target women to increase their participation in the paid workforce so that we pay more taxes, and as a result then would have a higher GDP. Putting that all, of course, in gender equity language may sound nice, but in reality, if the government didn't think it was beneficial somehow for the bottom line, I don't think they would be quite as interested in it.
There seems to be some underlying assumption from our government and a lot of the media that all women would actually rather be working outside of the home as opposed to staying at home, raising a family, or caring for aging parents. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a bit of a misnomer these days to talk about women in the home writ large. We have a mompreneur phenomenon that happens. Many times women will be on maternity leave and then morph their careers into something that they can do more from home. Develop a business on the side, hence the entrepreneur side of the mompreneur phenomenon. While it may be a bit of a myth that you just have the stay-at-home mom or you have a working mother, I think those two things have been combined in our current economy, and we should applaud those choices. We should work towards part-time employment for those who desire it. It's kind of funny because no one ever wished on their deathbed that they would spend more time in the office, and that's for men and women equally, mothers and fathers equally. So we need to find a way to incorporate families into our working lives. And the way to do that, I think, is to honor choice and have a good economy and not work towards a specific sector doing more of this or that.
How about those female entrepreneurs, though? Again, raising kids at home, having a side business as well that you can run from home, and maybe taking care of your parents at the same time. Wouldn't it be a win-win?
Well, what you're getting at there, I think, is the very important contribution of anybody, male or female, who does work in the caring sector for aging parents, for example, for children with disabilities, for example. Not everybody can be neatly slotted into the 9-to-5 workday, and we shouldn't aim for that. We should really honor the caregiving of men and women, largely women, but men and women across the country.
Do you find it kind of strange as well that we often hear cheers and people celebrating men who choose to stay at home to care for kids, but not so much for women?
Yeah, and I think there's a little bit of an overcoming of the past there that is exaggerated. So for women today working, we don't need to overcome some past where there were not opportunities open to women. We're beyond that now, and we have access to the workforce. We have access to many different choices, and that's great. But there's still this sentiment that we somehow need to applaud the father who stays home full time, whereas the mother who stays home full time is wasting her time. And you can't have it be applause worthy on one end and a waste of time on the other end, unless you are looking at it strictly through gender equity lens, strictly through a feminist lens. But most people don't consider their families that way.
Now, Andrea, is there still a gender-based wage gap? Do women in Canada earn less simply because they're female?
I think there's many reasons why there is a slight wage gap. I don't think it's as large as we are being told. I don't think it's a problem that we can fix. I think it has a lot to do with women's choices and the types of fields that we go into. There's a lot of different factors there that we aren't discussing. It's not really a fair discussion when we look at the gender wage gap. So, and that I don't necessarily think we want government to be coming in to quote unquote fix this if it has to do a lot with choices that are different between the genders.
I've noticed recently that there's a real push to get women into the trades fields or maybe in math and science industries, which traditionally have been male dominated. Is that good policy?
No form of coercion is good policy. I think that the government needs to be neutral with regards to people's choices and their family choices. And this is something that I've advocated for many years as good public policy, that when we are neutral towards choices, when we allow families to make the choices that they'd like to make, then we have good public policy. So pushing people into any particular sector, I'm not sure that it will work, first and foremost, and I'm also not sure that it's good public policy.
Well, my daughter's 19 years old and she had a real passion to go into becoming a welder. I was like, yeah, more female welders, why not? Absolutely. A lot of those jobs are recession-proof too, a lot of the trades, right?
Well, that's good, and hats off to your daughter for desiring to do something that would be slightly unconventional.
That's right. Bank of Canada Governor Stephen Poloz recently suggested that a national form of Quebec's universal daycare model would help more women enter the workforce. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that he's missing out on some of the research as regards the outcomes for the daycare program. We know a lot of the research shows negative outcomes for parents as well as children. And if we look at the economic concept of full employment, I'm not convinced that just because we get more of a certain sector into the workforce that we actually have more jobs. So then the question is there a crowding out effect? Is there another sector of people, another type of person who's not getting a job? For example, new graduates. There's a lot to consider there and a lot to unpack. So when that was reported, I don't think it was particularly nuanced. And I'm sure different economists would have different opinions on that.
I understand some of the studies done show that daycare is actually the last choice on the list of options for parents when it comes to who parents would like to see caring for their kids. Do we want to see strangers maybe raising our kids, or is it better to maybe have a dad or mom stay at home?
Well, a survey that we did not too long ago showed that something like 70% of Canadians believe the best place for a child under 6 is at home with parents. And after that, you have a desire for family members. After that, small or local neighborhood care centers. So the type of care that's done or used in creating national daycare programs tends to be institutional, sort of center-based care, and that is probably one of the last options for Canadians in surveys.
So if subsidized national daycare is in fact expanded, it would financially benefit a small percentage of the population. But what about those who choose to take a financial hit, like we said earlier, stay at home for the kids? Is there any government assistance for them?
There is actually. The current Liberal government continued a policy of the former Conservative government, which involved funding for parents per child. So that is a good type of policy to keep in place. The Liberals actually improved it somewhat by making it targeted to income so that those who would be most in need would get the most money. So yes, there is some support for families who need it.
Now, Andrea, there's also been some talk of requiring Canadian corporations to have equal gender representation on their boards. Do you think that's helpful in some way?
I fundamentally disagree with state involvement in private business. So I'm sure those businesses know exactly what they need to have their companies be a success. And also, when I talk to women who are working in the corporate sector, many times they're the ones who find that the most insulting. They need everyone to know they're there for their skill set and not because there was a quota put in place.
So give me some suggestions that maybe we can forward to our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government, how they can most help working women and women who want to stay at home with their children, raise their families.
So my number one concern is actually that when women stay home past the 1-year maternity leave that is somewhat standard in this country, it can be very difficult for them to re-enter the workforce. I think there's some public policy help that could be provided there. And that would also help point to both the value of stay-at-home parents and the value of the workforce, and sort of push those two together, closer together, without them being quite so oppositional. That's one area that there might be a bit of maneuvering that the government could do. Otherwise, again, freedom of choice is important, and that the government should be neutral to people's choices is also very important.
And how about potentially maybe some training as well for, let's say, a mom who stays at home with the kids their first 5-6 years, the most influential part of a child's life, as they're forming their personality, maybe to re-enter the workforce, maybe have some of those programs being provided, to allow that woman to get back into her chosen profession or maybe something else. Because after you've been out of it for 5 or 6 years, sometimes it's hard to get back in.
Yeah, exactly. That's the type of thing I'm thinking about. And also decreasing barriers. So for certain professional occupations, you lose your license after a certain amount of time. Would there be a way to hold on to that license through a minimal amount of participation? That kind of thing would be very helpful, I think.
Andrea Mrazek, Family Program Director with Cardis, thanks a lot for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Broadcasting from Lethbridge, Alberta is great. We have the Coulees here, Henderson Lake, a beautiful place to raise the family. The mountains are not far away with Waterton Lakes National Park. But is our city a good place to do business in? How do we stack up against other municipalities of similar size? Joining me now in studio is Trevor Lewington, CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. Welcome back to BCN.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Trevor, first of all, what is Economic Development Lethbridge all about?
So our role really as a not-for-profit society is to support the city in its activities of attracting new investment, but we're also here to help entrepreneurs with their startups. We're here to help existing businesses expand and grow.
Okay, now how does Lethbridge actually compare economically with other medium-sized cities here in Western Canada?
Great question. I mean, we typically have some of the lowest unemployment figures in the province, so we have a very robust workforce here. I think having two sort of world-class post-secondary institutions is really important for having the labor that's necessary to drive today's business. But we also have a pretty good operating cost. So businesses that come here know they're getting reasonable rates for their utilities. They have reasonable costs for their land. It makes them very competitive, not only on the provincial, but also the national scale.
We've got some wonderful events coming up here. I mean, we've got the World Curling Championships, but we didn't get the Memorial Cup, the 2020 Memorial Cup. Why do you think that was?
Yeah, I mean, the Hurricanes put forward a great bid. This is a team that's had a pretty significant turnaround over the last couple of years. They've got a great leadership team. They've got some great players. I think they put forward a very competitive bid. At the same time, every community that bids on the Memorial Cup does exactly the same thing, right? You put your best foot forward. And ultimately, it's up to the governors of the Canadian Hockey League to make the decision on which community and where it belongs.
But I mean, Kelowna already had it before. We've never had it.
A community-owned team that's never hosted it. I personally think, of course, Lethbridge had the most robust bid overall.
And the Canes had a great run as well in the playoffs, didn't they?
Canes have had 2 great years in particular. It's been a rebuilding phase for them. Again, very disappointing that Lethbridge wasn't selected, but we'll be back next time we have the opportunity to bid, I'm sure.
And that's what Mayor Chris Bierman was saying as well. Very disappointed, but at the same time, we'll definitely be back. Now, let's talk about Lethbridge economically. Are we out of the woods when it comes to the recession? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about Lethbridge is we have a pretty diversified economy. So when the rest of Alberta saw an economic downturn, Lethbridge really didn't see any negative impacts. So we saw economic growth during the downturn. We saw housing starts increase. We saw unemployment remain stable. So Lethbridge basically avoided the worst of the storm when that economic downturn occurred. Things continue to look bright. We have, again, the lowest unemployment in the province as of today, down to 4.8% in September, which is an improvement over last month and the same time last year. We continue to have lots of great prospects in terms of new construction and new business growth. So Lethbridge, things are looking bright.
And we've got Cavendish Farms with that $300 million expansion,
Absolutely.
creating some jobs at the same time. How about some other economic spin-offs as a result, Trevor?
Right, so obviously the initial impact of building what is the largest private investment in the city's history is significant in terms of temporary construction jobs. It allowed us to retain a significant employer here. They're actually adding labor when they expand and open their new plant. But it also impacts the region. This is 8,000 to 9,000 new acres of potatoes that are required. It's all of the value chain impacts when you think about trucking and logistics and raw materials. So, it's good from a community perspective. We see payroll taxes, we see costs paid to the city for municipal taxes, it's employment, but it benefits the entire region.
How about talk of any other potential businesses and big business moving to our city?
Yeah, so there's always people in the pipeline. I mean, that's the nature of our work. We have 30 active files currently that we're working through. Some of those projects are small. They could be, small proprietors.
Can we say what industry? Can you?
Well, agri-food is a big focus for us.
We're agriculture here,
we have a number of organizations both outside of Canada and inside of Canada looking to expand to Lethbridge. And the trouble with my job is sometimes things you can't share for sometimes 2 or 3 years as those files develop. But I will tell people that there's lots of great potential, and we're excited about what lays ahead.
What's interesting too is that legalized marijuana, across the country, October 17th, and but no licenses were actually given out to Lethbridge. So if people wanted their stash, so to speak, they have to go to Calgary, Edmonton.
Right.
What happened here in Lethbridge?
Yeah, so there are a number of businesses in Lethbridge that have already prepared storefronts. There are a number that have expressed interest, and applications have been made. So my understanding is there's between about 12 and 20 applications for storefront retail operations here in Lethbridge. Just a function of time and the process and all the regulations, none of those businesses will be approved in time for the October 17th date. But in the following weeks and months thereafter, I'm sure we'll see a number of storefronts open up. The other piece of the cannabis business, of course, is production. So Aurora has announced a significant investment in Medicine Hat. 51st Parallel is an organization that has already previously announced a greenhouse and packaging operation here in Lethbridge. So there's also jobs and potential for the development inside of the actual production side of the cannabis industry.
Now, many people realize that we have a bit of an ongoing drug crisis here in our city. I mean, the mayor's addressed it, the police have talked about it.
For sure.
Arches has discussed it as well. Jill Manning right now, the managing director. The opioid crisis in our city, do you think that's scaring away some business owners from opening up shop in Lethbridge?
Well, I mean, let's face it, every community in Canada right now, and arguably North America, is dealing with an opioid crisis. So homelessness, the effects of drugs in every community is a challenge. Of course, we notice what's here at home. There's a number of things being done, particularly in the downtown, with investments in infrastructure, new programs, new monitoring, additional safety. I really think we just need to continue to work with the business community, understand what the issues are, and make sure that we're working with all 3 levels of government where the different jurisdictions overlap to find solutions to the problem. So I don't think it detracts from investment. I don't think it necessarily detracts from people staying in the downtown, but it is certainly something we have to continue to work against.
It's interesting though, Trevor, we've interviewed some of the business owners around Arches.
For sure.
The safe consumption and injection site. And they're concerned because they say a lot of their customers are staying away because they don't want to be accosted or run into some of the drug dealers in and around Arches.
No, I mean, we've definitely heard from a number of businesses in the downtown area that are either considering relocating out of downtown or changing the way they do business. But I think the key distinction there is they're not looking at leaving Lethbridge or shutting down. But again, we need to address those concerns. We simply can't have traffic declines of 50% in a retail business. That's not something that's sustainable. So we've got to figure out a way to help those businesses to either change their business or find a different way.
So how do you market the city of Lethbridge when you go out to other cities and you want to attract that investment? How do you really market the city of Lethbridge? I mean, we've got, like I said, the beautiful mountains, the coulees.
Right.
It's an affordable place, a great place to raise a family for the most part. It's fairly clean.
Yeah, I mean,
fairly affordable.
quality of life. So all of
Right.
those great aesthetic things that you've talked about, great facilities are important to employers. They want to make sure that their staff have a great community to live in and that it's a place where people want to be. For us, it's really getting to know the customer. So if a manufacturer is to come to Lethbridge, what's a key success factor in their business? Is it utility costs? Is it access to raw materials? I mean, our location on the Canamex Highway can sometimes be a big selling feature. So my role, my team, is really to understand what exactly does the customer need, figure out what those key things are, and help them understand the advantages of Lethbridge.
How about having WestJet here in town now? Has that opened the doors for other businesses to potentially come into town? And
Yeah, WestJet is a great news story for our community. I mean, airport traffic, if we look at 2017, just July and August, traffic was about 9,500 passengers coming in and out. If we fast forward to July and August of this year, it's basically just shy of 20,000. So we've
Wow.
almost doubled traffic, passenger movements at the airport. WestJet is certainly a contributing factor to that, but even Air Canada has seen better utilization of its routes and fuller aircraft. So the first angle, of course, is always movement of passengers, looking at changes to governance and operations of the airport, and then long-term focusing on freight and logistics. How do we make the airport a center for the movement of goods and people?
so, Trevor, what would you say is the number one factor to actually attract businesses to Lethbridge? Is it the lower tax base, perhaps?
I think it really depends. Every business has a key factor that they're looking for,
Okay.
and so it just depends. So if I'm an agri-food company, typically it's proximity to raw material supply. Some of our tech companies that have located here have indicated that the proximity and the access to the college and the university and the willingness of those institutions to work with them on research as a key factor. So I think it really depends on the business and what they're trying to accomplish.
And maybe good transit as well. That plays a role too. Does the city have
Absolutely.
a good transit system, for their employees, right, to get around and to make their way to work on time?
Right. I mean, we always joke that we have probably the shortest commutes in Western Canada, but we now have data to support that more residents in Lethbridge have a commute of 15 minutes or less than any other census metropolitan area in Western Canada.
Well, it's
So-
funny, yeah, because I lived in Southern Ontario, and
I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, no, but I live in Stony Creek, Hamilton. I drive to Toronto, and it would take me an hour and a half in the morning and then 2.5 hours to get home. So 4 hours I'm on the road, not including my
Absolutely.
work time. And then I moved to Lethbridge, and people say it took me 17 minutes to get home.
That's
I'm not
right.
happy.
That's right.
I'm like, wow, that's tough for rush hour. That's too bad. I'm sorry.
and for an employer, that's productive time that your employee is either celebrating life and enjoying a higher quality of life, or they're in the office actually doing work and not being stuck in traffic trying to dodge conference calls and different things, right?
That's
so
right.
that makes a big difference.
How about immigrants who have made their way to our beautiful city? Mm-hmm. Have they found work? Have they maybe started their own businesses as well?
We're very fortunate to have Lethbridge Family Services that has, a specific group, an immigration services department that works with new immigrants. But we have seen a number of immigrants start their own businesses. Amar Shahid is a student at the university, along with two colleagues that started Jiran 55, which is a Syrian sort of community kitchen that they're trying to provide opportunities for particularly females in the Syrian community to network and also to provide a viable business. So Doria and Doria Immigration Consulting is an example of a couple from the Philippines that went through that process themselves, perhaps learned the hard way on how to come to Canada and what that looks like. They've now started their own consulting business to help others with that same process. So we do see immigrants come to this country, bring their unique skills and experiences, and adapt and apply those to doing business here in Lethbridge.
What do you think, in your opinion, the provincial and federal government could do to work with the municipality to attract more business to our city?
Well, the thing I would like all governments to remember is that they can't regulate in isolation, right? So Lethbridge is a part of a provincial, national, and international ecosystem. So when tax changes are made, when regulation changes are made, it affects business because capital flows wherever it's going to find the greatest return. So we have to remember that we're operating and competing, quite frankly, with other jurisdictions. So that's a big part of it. And then it's really understanding the needs of business. So a perfect example of, I think, something that has great potential is a new digital media tax credit that the provincial government has announced that local tech companies in the media space can now use to compete with companies in Ontario and Quebec, for example, that's had a similar tax credit for many, many years. So we've leveled the playing field in that particular sector of the information technology
How
field.
well are entrepreneurs really doing in our city? Some cities, it's a real struggle. It's more civil servants, it's more other industries. But how about the smaller mom and pop shops? Are they thriving in our city? Or
Well-
are they losing out to the bigger box stores? They move into our city.
Yeah, the vast majority of employment in Lethbridge actually comes from smaller businesses. So just over 50% of businesses in Lethbridge employ 4 people or less. So although we have a large number of sort of big employers, the vast majority of jobs are actually created by small business, and that's really been sort of a tradition of Lethbridge.
So the bread and butter here, right?
Absolutely.
How about when it comes to real estate? How's the real estate market? I've talked to some realtors recently. It's kind of soft now, Hal. It's a little bit of a soft market. But I'm thinking, well, isn't the economy turning around? Usually when it's a little more robust, you know, people are moving into town.
For sure.
Supply and demand, there's not as much supply. The demand is high. But no, apparently it's a soft market right now.
We have seen new housing starts drop about 5% so far this year as compared to last year. And in terms of resale homes, we have seen that volume of resales drop about 10% compared to last year. So certainly would imply that there's a softer market. One of the other considerations to remember, of course, is federal mortgage changes. The rules have been changed, interest rates, stress tests.
Yeah.
You know, the ability for buyers to qualify has become more difficult. So we think that's certainly driving a part of that softness in demand.
Now, I'm looking at starting my own business here in Lethbridge, let's say, hypothetically speaking, right? Now you have a boot camp, a 13-week boot camp for entrepreneurs. Tell me a bit about that.
So at Tech Connect, which is our center for entrepreneurship in the city, we do offer a number of training programs. We offer free business coaching, but we've just started a 13-week boot camp. And the idea is to take any entrepreneur from ideation, from, hey, I've got a great idea, don't know what to do next, through those 13 weeks, that they'll exit the program with a business plan they can take to the bank and perhaps even begin their operation. So it's really meant to provide the training and the tools and even a bit of a network. So as you go through the class with your cohort, you meet a few people that are maybe having the same struggles, and now you've got some resources you can talk to as well.
So Trevor, what advice would you give to a young person watching our program here on Bridge City News who wants to potentially start their own business?
Yeah, the first thing I think that's key is have a plan. Right, so it's not enough to just...
Not just a vision, right?
Not just a vision or an idea, that's important, but you have to have a plan. And so there's a number of tools in terms of developing a business plan. We're happy to help with that training. There's a number of organizations in our community that help with that. The second piece, I think, is be prepared to work hard. It takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of time, and it's always more than you think it's going to be. And then the third thing is make sure you use your network. There's a ton of resources that are available in our community, a ton of people that are willing to help and mentor. Use that network. You're not alone, and we want entrepreneurs to be successful.
So last thoughts here. What do we need to do? How do we need to improve as a city to attract more entrepreneurs to come to our city? What are some of your thoughts?
Well, I think
every city needs to improve in some area.
Every city has opportunities to improve, and I think it's incumbent on all of us as residents of Lethbridge to not only advocate for our community and sell the advantages when you're networking with your peers around the country and around the world. It's also important that you engage with the city. So where there's issues, I mean, there's a number of open house sessions that happen on the opioid crisis, for example, on downtown redevelopment, and very often those audiences are empty. Right, so government can't act without feedback, and I would say people getting engaged, having a voice, and making sure that their ideas are put forward is key to us moving forward as a community.
Trevor Lewington, CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge, thanks a lot for joining me here at Bridge City News.
Thanks for having me once again.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.